And here we are again, talking on another tape of the GWT and Associates series. Today we're going to be talking about financial power. Financial power. I've always said, if you can show me how I can pay my bills with love, unity, and understanding, that I won't worry about money. But unfortunately, we live in a money society, so we're going to have to talk a little bit about finances. You know, millions of people the world over sacrifice their life and total possessions just to get on little boats and come to America for an opportunity that we miss, and even though we're right here with it. America is the greatest land in the world as far as I'm concerned when it comes to an opportunity. Now, it's true that many people make millions of dollars in other countries, but all in all, America is where it's at. Today we're going to be talking about financial power. Now, all of us, they say, cannot be millionaires. Now, I doubt that. If you got a normal intelligence and you're willing to put in 18 hours a day and work 7 days a week, you can be a millionaire. But it takes training, it takes knowledge, it takes understanding. And GWT and Associates not only has this video, but we have one of our associates who will be talking to you on 6 or more cassettes. And these cassettes will give you a detailed plan on how not only to make money, but how to make money with not increasing your income, how to use your money properly. A lot of time we can cut back on our wasteful spending, and we can get rich with the difference. We're always talking about the government needs to cut back. When you think about it, do you cut back? Do you plan a budget real good? We're always criticizing government officials for what we don't even do ourselves. You can save on your insurance. There's many things you can save on. The main thing is you got to learn to save for you. Now, at one time I didn't earn but 15 cents an hour, believe it or not. I saved a nickel of it. Now, why would I save a nickel? That don't amount to much. Well, for about a year, I made 15 cents an hour. So that nickel mounted up. But it wasn't at the end of the year what the nickel was worth. It was the fact that I got in the habit of saving when I earned 15 cents an hour. Then when I went 25 cents an hour, 35, 50, $4. Then when I made millions of dollars, I was able to have the habit of saving a certain amount. If I have to come up with a few dollars, somehow or another, I always got a few dollars. I'll never forget my father. When I was a little boy, he ran a Forester tower. He made $30 a month. This is in 1940, and I was 6 years old. It was in Nichols, South Carolina. And we moved from Nichols to Nichols, South Carolina with an old green 38 Chevrolet. We had to take the back seat out of the car, and we put the hog in the back seat. Myself, my brother Wayne, my brother John, my mother and father was in the front seat. And so I remember petting the hog. And the choice was made by my father to leave the seat and take the hogs because the hogs would have pigs, and they would grow up and we'd have meat for the winter, so we wouldn't starve. But we got down there and the old Chevy wouldn't run anymore, and we had to go to town, and he hadn't been paid that first $30 check. So we walked down 3 miles. And I'll never forget, it's about 6 years old, I'm holding his finger and I'm walking along in the sandy road, and we got to town, and Daddy had to ask someone to loan him $2 worth of groceries to payday. My brother John was sick, and he had to have some cough syrup or some medicine of some sort. And that man laughed at my father and told him he shouldn't be in that position where he had to borrow money or beg money or get some on credit. He said, I don't know you, you're new in the community, I'm not going to let you have it. And my daddy walked out in front of 5 other men, very ashamed. His head hung low, and he got outside and he says, I'm never going to be poor again. I'm never going to be poor again. I'll never be broke. I'll always have a few dollars in my pocket. So we started out of town, and even at 6 years old, I said, Daddy, why don't you try the other store? And it was a little old wooden store leaning over. And in that store was an old man and an old woman. And the teeth were missing, for the most part, out of their mouths. And they had a big old fat cat she had laying in her lap she was petting. She had some snuff in her lip sticking out there. And I went in there, and she said, are you hungry, little boy? And I was always hungry in those days. And so she gave me some bologna and some cheese off them big old slabs they used to have. And the old man gave my father $3 worth of credit. And from that day on, even though his prices was higher, my father always traded at that store for the next 4 or 5 years while we lived in that community. And on the way home that night, my father looked at me and he said, Glenn, don't ever be caught without at least a few dollars in the bottom of your wallet. I've always had a few dollars in the bottom of my wallet, because you never know when someone you love or care about needs it. Financial. That's the first thing I learned about finance. I learned if you don't have money, you cannot take care of those you love. And my brother was sick, and I'll never forget that impression it made on me. And I made up my mind too that I was going to be wealthy. I'll never forget later life. I saw the movie The Carpetbaggers. When I saw that movie, I knew that I could be a multi-millionaire. I said, if one man can do it, or one woman can do it, all can do it. Don't let anyone tell you that you're poor and you don't have the brain to do it. You can do it with a fruit stand. You can do it with just about anything. There's people who got rich with fruit stands because they didn't open a supermarket. But you got to start. Everyone has a talent to making it something. But I know a man one time that he did odd jobs in Indianapolis. This is a friend in the Reader's Digest many years ago. And in Indianapolis, this man would go around and he'd do odd jobs for people and their wives. He'd go up and say, can I sharpen your knives? He had a file. He'd say, can I babysit? And he got to be everybody's friend. And he'd go down to the business section at the mayor's office. He'd do little odd jobs, sweep out the floor. And everybody knew him as Old Bill. And so he died. And when he died, there was 5,000 people at his funeral. And everybody looked and said, well, do you know Old Bill? Everybody knew Old Bill in town. The mayor was there, the city council was there. Neither one of them knew that he was doing something for the other people. The wives was there, and they said, you mean he came by all these years to the house to cut the grass? Well, I never bothered to ask you. So Old Bill had friends, and he had over $200,000 buried in his mattress and the bottom of his closet. He had saved his money doing odd jobs. And then there's a story one time about a woman in China that came out, and her name, I call her Old Mary, because that was her nickname. Old Mary was a tremendous person. When she was 7 years old, she was sold as a mistress for a great warlord of China. That was in the early 1900s. She was one of many wives, and she grew up trained to be one of this man's wives. Excuse me. And then finally her husband became a gambler, and he lost his land, he lost all his holdings. And this is long about the Second World War time, about in the late 30s. So what happened is all the wives were eventually sold away and sold off, but the favorite wife was this particular woman that later became known to the American sailormen and seamen as Old Mary. And so Old Mary, she took her husband, who was a drunk, her 3 sons, who were almost grown. She went to Hong Kong walking, and she became a hawker. Now, a hawker in those days had a big basket, 2 big baskets on a stick, and they put it on their shoulders, and they carried it around, and they had a big hat, and they would sell things they crocheted, little things they made, and she got her sons to make. Her husband finally died. They lived in a 1-room basement, was barely 10 foot by 10 foot. And they got married. There was a whole bunch of them living there, about 19 kids in all, counting everybody. And she would go, and there was 15,000 hawkers in the city. And she would go around and she'd sell. And if she earned 2 cents a day in the 30s, she was rich. And she would make most of the time a penny. One day she went up on this big ship. And she went up there, and they didn't like them on the ships, because they let one on there, 15,000 wanted to get on there and sell to the seamen when they come into port. So they were going to throw her off, a 75-foot drop off this big ship. Finally, this big red-faced man with a big red beard was standing up on top of the deck. He said, wait a minute. He said, why are you on this ship? She said, I support my family this way. He said, well, I'm going to let you get off. We're not going to throw you off. If you ever come back, we're going to throw you off. So she started off, and she started singing and making a little joyful noise and dancing, and he got to laughing. And finally he said, well, you're going off. So she started off, and she found the latest purse at the bottom of the gangplank. It had $2,000 in it. She could have took that and opened a furniture factory, which is her dream, but she didn't do it. She ran back on there and said, hey, Capitan, some lady lost her purse. And he came down, it was his wife first, and it turned out that this was old man Dollar who owned all the shipping, big ships of that day. Came out of New York and Boston area. So he gave a $100 reward. And she said, I cannot take $100. I know earn it. You must keep it. He said, well, what can I do for you? She said, you give me pass to go on your ship, Captain. She thought he had only one ship, but he had 100. So all the ships from that day forward that came in there, one of his ships, she would go on and she would make hundreds of dollars from those boys she took care of. When they get drunk, she would talk to the police out to let them go back to the ship, and her boys would haul them back. If somebody was trying to beat them out of their money, she'd negotiate for them. The Japanese came in and they put her in a prison camp. She had to work in the rice field, her and the kids. One day she looked over and some American boys were working there also. And there's American boys. One of them was old Joe. And she said, hey, Joe, what you do here? He said, I got shot down. I was a flyer. She said, Joe, you owe me $2.52. I have it. I owe you right here in this rack. And she had over $40,000 in IOUs that she'd loaned American boys, and they had to come back because of the war. And she'd kept it all these years, and they was all faded, some of them. Well, Joe says, old Mary, trust me. I'm going to get out tonight for the underground way. They're going to smuggle us out, a few of us guys, and so we get back into the war. So she gave him that belt. And after the war was over, the Shippers Union in London, these things wound up in their hands, and the word went out all over the world that old Mary was in trouble. And old Mary needed help. And the money began to pour in. Over $38,000. Only $2,000 was missing. And probably guys got killed in the war. $38,000 come in, and that was like millions of dollars a day. And over in China and Hong Kong, it's like unbelievable totals of millions. She opened a furniture factory, and at 105 years old, she died with her great-grandchildren, over 60 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren at her bedside. She was the richest woman in Hong Kong, a true story. Old Mary. Every time I think I can't make any money, and I think I got a financial problem, I think of what this woman went through. Think about that. Being sold as a mistress when you're 7 years old, and rises to one of the wealthiest people in the world, especially in the Hong Kong area. So you can do it. You didn't have it as rough as her. Don't ever think you can't. Another story I like to tell is about Wing and Wong. I like the Chinese stories. And this boils down to why you can be successful or not successful. Mr. Wing was very positive. And this is no offense on the Wong families of the world, but Mr. Wong was very negative. I had to name him something. Now, Mr. Wong had 1 acre, 1 wife, 1 son, mental retarded, because he's under no nutrition. Well, his wife's Patty was always brown. He didn't put enough water. He never would work. He was lazy. Mr. Wing had 10,000 acres, many wives, as was custom in that day to have, many sons, and 1 fine son who was 18 years old, very handsome young fella. And so what happened is every time Mr. Wing would make a decision, you know this kind of person, to do something or try to do something, Mr. Wong would walk a half a day, leave his work alone when he should have been taking care of his own business, and come over and give Mr. Wing advice. Honorable Wing, this is Honorable Wong. I like to tell you something. You make a very bad mistake buying that bull. That bull is not good bull. You should have bought the other kind of bull. You should not clear that field. This is the wrong time to plant. So one day he bought this big, beautiful white stallion for breeding purpose. And Mr. Wong come over to give him his wise counsel as always. And he got over there and he gives him a story of why he should have bought 10 horses for the same price. You pay $10,000, you should have got 10 horses, because 1 break a leg, 1 run away to the hills chasing wild mares, you have 9 left. See? He said, no, I wanted 1 good one. I wanted 1 good one. He said, well, you make a mistake. He said, well, maybe I have and maybe I hadn't. We'll have to wait and see. So he went back home. That was the day of his time. Mr. Wing went on about his business. 2 weeks later, the horse jumped the fence and run to the hill chasing wild mares. Mr. Wong come trotting over there again. He said, see, if you hired me as your counselor, you would be much more better off. See, you make a bad mistake. He said, well, maybe I haven't. He said, he run away. He said, well, we'll have to wait and see if that's bad. About a month later, the horse came out of the hills with 300 mares following him into this pasture. He was very wealthy. Mr. Wong come over and say, you fall in a pile of it, you smell like a rose. I don't understand it. So he said, such good fortune. He said, maybe it's not good fortune. We'll have to wait and see. A few days later, his favorite son was breaking one of the mares to saddle. He threw him, and he broke his leg. And Wong come over and said, see, you should listen to me. See, your son wouldn't have that broken leg. He said, well, maybe it's not too bad he's got a broken leg. We'll have to wait and see. A couple of weeks later, the warlord came through and took all the young men off the war, and they all got ill in the war, but Mr. Wing's son couldn't go because he had a broken leg. See? So you never know. The man that was given the financial advice didn't have it. Sometimes you talk it, but you don't live it. You've got to lay out a plan. And the tapes that GWT and Associates give you are some of the most powerful tapes. And one of our associates, a young man, does a tremendous job on this tape, these 6 tapes. And there may be a few more than that. Eventually we'll add more to it. But these tapes give you the nuts and bolts. Now, sometimes they're a little boring to me, you know, but so is college. But you need that degree. Everything is boring. Sometimes the facts of your life is more boring. So what you got to do is you've got to study these. You've got to listen to these tapes 21 times. All of our tapes. This tape here, you got to listen to it 21 times. Now this tape is not designed to teach you anything. This tape is designed right here, this basic videotape, to get you excited about listening to my associate who will give you the nuts and bolts and the meat to how to get your financial life in order, as well as all the other tapes that I make. And I don't give all the facts. I don't have an ego. I don't have to give all the facts. And that's why we have people that's better qualified than I, that speak more plainly, that can give you the facts. So remember Wing and Wong, and remember old Mary, and remember old Joe up in Indianapolis. Because these people should have never made it financially. There's somebody in your town that you say, how'd that dummy make it? Sometimes it takes a person that's not too bright to get ahead, because they can't figure out how it won't work. They can't use that computer to tell them what's wrong with everything, or that slide rule to figure it out. I always say, if you think it can't be done, some idiot with an 8th grade education will come by and do it right in front of your eyes. God bless you. This is Glenn Turner. Have a good day.